formation and managing all these things. So what you guys are seeing being developed in terms of the coaching manual, like Coach Clute gets a lot of credit for that, all the credit for that, right? The way that that thing looks, the content, the aggregation of that content, putting it in a presentable way, our videos, all these things that are coming out, Drew's done a great job with that, and the more to come. So I think not only, I mean, you can read his bio about his coaching background, but I think what's important is that we have teachers, we have educators, and he's a lifetime learner, educator, who's putting these things together for us at a very high level. So it is much appreciated what Drew is doing. Drew's fresh off of a CIF championship too this fall with Jay Sarah back there, but not that results matter, right? But more importantly, he's a teacher who's been putting this stuff together. So let's thank Drew not only for what he's about to do, but for what he's done and will continue to do in terms of the materials he's putting together. Thank you.
All right. So I have been tasked with talking about tactical stuff, offense, defense. I'm going to try to use 30 minutes for offense, 30 minutes for defense. Although I went through a dry run and I was like at a minute 10, or an hour 10. So we'll see. I might talk a little fast, and that's, you know, okay. But you'll have access to all the PowerPoints, and I actually have notes on a pages sheet, you know, so I can put that in a Google Drive, and I think like a QR, we'll use like maybe a QR code. You can kind of access it tomorrow. But at any rate, so don't feel like, you know, you got to write down everything on a slide or take pictures of slides. Some of you videoing, that's great, but you'll have access to this stuff pretty soon after this weekend. Before we start though, I do want to point out, like, you know, I get credit for the manual and some other stuff. You know, John made this comment and Dan made a comment similar, but, you know, I'm not like that smart at all. I've just been really fortunate to be around really, really smart people. And if I have one talent, it's the ability just to take in a bunch of information and seek the information and then just kind of like parse it out and like put it in spots and, you know, and kind of make sense of it. Not that, I mean, everyone, what I'm trying to say is everyone has that. And so just kudos to you for coming this weekend and taking the time, you know, it's taking away from your families. I know you guys are at swim meets. But like, I didn't play at a high level. I mean, he said I want to see a championship. I'm an assistant coach with a good friend of mine. So I'm not like a head coach anymore. I love my spot in life and where water polo fits into that. And but it's just gaining as much information as you can, and then sitting on it, digesting it, and then implementing it. And so you don't have to be like some phenomenal athlete to do that, or have play at some high level to do that. And I don't fit in that category. So I just want to kind of maybe share that before we got going. All right, so as we talk about offense and defense, I thought it was kind of fun to mention this idea of cosmic duality. You know, not to get all crazy, you know, hippy-dippy, but like this idea that like everything connects to itself and to the things around it. So the things you're talking about, front court offense, right? Well, what happens in the counterattack and what happens, you know, what comes after your front court offense and your transition defense, all that matters, and all of it sets up the thing that comes before and after. And so just like, you know, shadow can't exist without light, or vice versa, you know, we talk about offense, but keep in the back of your mind, there's things on defense that matter a lot, that set up the things on offense. So speaking of that, you know, how we get into our front court matters. So, you know, we can't talk about offense and spacing and driving and gap driving and cross pass and pressure, all this stuff, without talking about, you know, the counterattack, right? And talking about offensive counterattack principles. And this isn't necessarily a counterattack lesson, but, you know, these things are important to talk about. And furthermore, talking about front court defense. How are we, you know, kind of ending possessions or trying to end possessions that set ourselves up for the counterattack. So just real quick, I think this somewhat maybe looks familiar, right? How we break up the pool in the sections, create, read, and attack. Over the years, again, just been super fortunate to be able to bum around, or they let me bum around them really smart people, and you pick up things. And so I think it's important to still teach like create, read, and attack, absolutely. And then of course the left lane, middle lane, and right lane to help us vertically progress the ball down the pool with good spacing. But I think we tend to get a little more detail with descriptors when when we teach our kids this stuff, just to kind of drive home some really key points. So one is anticipation, of course, right? We want to have good anticipation skills. I mean, good fast twitch muscles, right? But just general awareness of player. We all have ball, player, area, center awareness. But what about clock and situation and score, right? Just looking at someone and, is he prepared to drive on me or not, right? So having that awareness and then the ability to react is really, really important, obviously, and then creating your advantage, right? You can't attack any advantage that you don't first create, and it happens here in this anticipate, read, and create section, the create section of the pool. And then in the middle part, awareness and talking. I think we talk about have awareness, but it does nothing if we're not communicating what we're gaining, right? So I think when we talk about awareness, think about information, and just think about gaining information, processing information, and communicating information. That's kind of what we want to teach our athletes to do. So make sure we're spaced properly, we're reading the situation, and we always say, talk amongst our guys, like talk and echo, right? So speak and then start chirping what you're hearing, and so that communication can kind of spread like a wildfire in given moments throughout the pool. And then space and pace. If the opportunity is not there for you to get the ball, can you open up? Can you space out horizontally to make sure that the defenders are having to chase you? And I think at some point, this next one. At some point we'll talk about this. Maybe I'll repeat myself, but maybe I'm not up in the counterattack, but if I can force that defender to turn around on his stomach and swim, I'm now limiting his ability to gain and process and communicate information. Right? As a defender, we'll talk about this at some point soon, but I want to be on my back so I can assess, right? So I can start looking and talking and hearing. If I'm forced to go on my stomach, not because I'm down necessarily, but just because the offensive player is moving real quick, then it limits my ability. And then, of course, that kind of disconnects me from my teammates and prevents us collectively, defensively, from being on the same page and organized, right? Obviously, in the red section, the attack section, we want to finish. We want to score goals, right? We want to attack before the defense, allow to organize. We want to teach our kids to kind of balance the we versus, the me versus we stuff. I mean, obviously, you want, like Dan talked about, you got to teach your guys how to attack in an attacking mindset. And it's philosophical, it's mental, it's emotional, but also, it's the last thing you want to do is force feed a goal or a shot, and it's blocked, and then you were up. Two guy, now you're blasted on a 2-on-0 going down the other end, and now it's a 2-goal swing. And so teaching them how to think in threes, right? I got to kick into this water, so that defender has to make a choice, and then my teammate can move into this water, right? Or I got to kick into this water so he can do this so the ball can go there. And just trying to get your athletes to expand their mind and their view of what's going on versus just kind of always focusing on blinders maybe on themselves, which is understandable. They're kids, and this is the time in their life developmentally where they learn these things. And then flow, have the confidence to finish, right? And then also have the maturity to just be patient and flow into your front court. It's like a friend of mine makes the comparison all the time, like counterattack's like landing a plane. You're coming in for the landing and realize the wheel's not down. Don't force the plane to land. Just pick up, fly back around, circle back around, get the gear down, and have a safe landing. The last thing you do is force a shot or try to play too fast, and then you get blasted the other way. And then this idea of opening and closing windows, just the ability, and that goes to the maturity aspect, right? Of like, we're off the counterattack, the center's kind of open, or whoever attacked the box is kind of open, and but having the awareness to maybe I can force feed that ball in, but that guy, there's two guys already head over their heels, and they're already swimming in, and why don't I ball fake to that, let that window close, and the two guys that those defenders just left are now kicking a little to their left, creating a new shooting line, and now we're in business. We're already in the zone attack in the first 3 seconds of our front court. We're in business. We're feeling good. And so the ability to kind of open. Then when you get really good as a player, I think you can dictate a little bit more when windows open and close. So, so there's some stuff in the counterattack. Again, a lot more detail within all this stuff, but just to kind of get us going into the front court. Before we get into the front court, though, top line. I don't know how you guys structure your counterattacks. Obviously, the first three guys, to me, it's important. The first three guys down the pool establish the first line. And we need that first line needs to establish deep left and deep right, okay? And then the box. Now, the first two guys, how I prefer to break it up, the first two guys within that front line need to establish deep right and deep left. And you kind of open up the gut of the pool for the third guy in that line to attack. And sometimes it works out where it's already guy in the left and the right, and boom, boom, and then this guy comes down. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's it was X3 and X2 or whatever, and they're going to end up here, and this guy's going to come and attack the box in the middle of the pool. So that kind of just goes into a little bit more detail. The top line, whoever finishes in this left lane, they're free to go one-on-one with that defender. How great would it be to push the ball deep right and go for a little cross pass for a shot? So it's not like it's not an attacking mindset. In fact, the left side of the pool is like go routes. They get to go and be as aggressive as they can in the counterattack and push tempo and try to get open. But the last thing he wants to do is stop short of this line and finish somewhere in here, because then it backs up here. He wants to, at best, get himself open for a cross pass, and then at worst, provide a ton of space to be attacked by the second line, the guy who finishes at position 2. And then we already talked a little bit about the right and middle lanes. So the back line, I prefer to have a short release. This is something I found really helpful at high school. I know, like ODP stuff. Sometimes we talk about, outlet the line, and all this too, by the way, just to clarify, we're assuming it's transition counterattack. There's no advantage stuff, right? And the different rules get applied there. But when all things are equal, I prefer to have this short release because it allows the goalie a quick little outlet to advance the ball down pool, okay? And then it also makes a lot more space here in the front court-ish because you're really dealing 5-on-5 for a little bit of time until this defender busts his butt back to play defense. Does that make sense? And so if we can get the ball short right, down left, or short right, deep right, now there's a ton of water for these guys to attack. And then also, fast forwarding that, right? So once the ball goes here to here, this defender typically is not going to sit and chill. He's going to swim back and inject himself in the defense. And if you don't if these two defenders over here are playing really good lane defense, off-ball defense, you at least have a little parachute pass here. The ball can go from here to here, and then he can move the ball over to the side of the center or whatever the case may be. So it just kind of helps facilitate things once you get into the front court. Dayon mentioned this earlier about something about defending in space and teaching defenders how to defend in space. So the flip side of that is we want to force defenders to defend in space, okay? And so by providing all this space here, when position 2 gets down to 2, there's no one to help X2. There's no one to help X2. So he can go one-on-one for a ball side drive to the box. He can go one-on-one for a backdoor drive. Maybe that's happened a few possessions that the defender now is coming off and playing like this, and you can kind of sell a drive back up and cross the ball. But you're now one-on-one with that defender. And so you want to force these guys to defend in space, and then that usually works out advantage for the offense, ejection goal, something positive. And look, I just put this up. This is from when John referenced Budapest, that we went to hang out with the women's team in Budapest last year. And this is the person attacking the box right here. So this is the deep right release. This is the middle attacker, and over here it doesn't exist in this drill, right? But that's the deep left. And this drill literally was come out, and Dan Layson's going to talk about the drill aspect and creating drills and things like that. But I just thought it was fun to show this drill. Another Dan Clute, assistant coach of the women's team, he came up with this at breakfast that morning. We were sitting there, and he and AK were talking about points of emphasis we need to kind of shore up before that night's game. And one thing that they didn't feel they were as aggressive in was that first line counter, kind of taking advantage in the box real quick before that back line can come, and making it a 3-on-3 game real quick or something like. So they just said, let's do this incorporate. And they just did a couple laps of this. And so. This isn't anything complex, right? And then this is at my high school. We're talking about creating advantages in the counterattack. And then you work backwards. Okay, well, how do we do that? How do we create a drill, right? And so, just to be fair, by the way, this is Paul Reynolds. He was one of the best players for a period of time in college water polo. So this is not one of our high school kids. But he's one of our assistant coaches. But the idea is like, okay, we just create a line and we go. And he busts on a counterattack, we get a one-on-0, we get to work on one-on-no skills and finishing. And so it's just kind of thinking about what you want to look like when you play and compete, and then working backwards and creating drills to help facilitate that. I think this is one similar. Go ahead, Brendan. One similar. Okay. So anyway, so now we've talked about a little bit of counterattack. So now we set the stage. Okay. So now we're in our front court. The question that I get asked all the time, not asked like I'm like some know-it-all, but like when I'm talking to people, it's like, hey, what system do you run, or what's your system? And it's a hard question to ask. Like I don't know. It depends, I guess, on how do you define system? Like to me, a system sounds a little too confining, a little too like you got to do this and then this happens and then this happens. You know, I was talking to Coach Layson, and he had a little bit of looser interpretation that kind of fits more in line with how I like to view offense, and he would call it a system. So it's, don't think I'm telling you don't label things system, but just be very wary of you know, how you define systems, right? And the best offenses don't have really structured stuff, although teams have been successful having very structured stuff. But they're based in a set of philosophies and a set of kind of guiding principles, right? The idea that you want to make defenders guard in space, right? The idea that you want to have good spacing, period. The idea that you want to have a plan, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is like, you know, teaching your athletes to make certain reads based in certain contexts, and then the rest of your players, you know, playing off of that. But it's not willy-nilly, free-for-all, pick-up basketball stuff. So developing a system that fits your athletes, but also your philosophy, is really, really important. And just kind of this quote from Oliver Holmes here about, you know, systems die, but instincts, you know, always remain. And so the more that we can teach our athletes and empower them to make reads and make decisions, and we do that in practice and in film session, and just increase their water polo IQ. A friend of mine called it freedom in a box. Like, we want to give our athletes definite parameters to work in, but within that, you know, they got freedom and choice, and they can kind of make decisions, and things flow off each other, and there's this like intricate dance that goes on. And the more IQ they have, the bigger that box can get, the more creative things you can do. Not creative, silly things, but, you know, the more efficient things you can do in the front court. So when putting this together, I thought, like, what do I want to say, or what do I want to share? So I thought I'd just share the 5 kind of like key things, elements to effective offenses. Okay, and it's having a plan, valuing positive possessions, information, spacing, and this idea of 2 attacks. Okay, so having a plan, you got to have a plan. You've got to have, and your players have to believe in it. Okay, and you got to train it. You know, Dan talked about using whiteboards. I can't tell you, I mean, maybe there's been random situations where it's like, you have a couple players. I remember one time a player got his eye split open, and we got some foul trouble, so we had some players that were not usually in the mix of our plays, and so we had to like adjust some things on the fly. But gosh, 99% of the time, you know, you come into a timeout, right, and you're talking about something you want to accomplish on the front court. It's things that you've already drilled and you've already played. I mean, you're never, very rarely are we, you know, drawing a play up. Okay, you go here, you do this, right? It's all stuff that we've practiced. The same thing with front court and offense. What are it's a play, it's a performance. You're going out there to give a performance, and you want to play, or you want to prepare for that. And obviously, like, not like a stage like this where you can control every aspect, but you want to have plans for when the plan doesn't work. So you're going to come off the counterattack and you're going to ball side drive. Well, is the ball side drive is what's important, or is it just attacking the box, attacking the goal? Well, what happens if the defender takes away ball side? Well, then that offensive player is going to go backdoor. He's going to attack the triangle here, and that's going to change what position 1 does. And so you just kind of have a plan, and your players know the plan. You know, the valuing of positive possessions. Have you guys ever heard of this idea of positive possessions before? You know, you don't have to score goals for it to be a valuable offensive 30-second spot there. If I'm forcing you into a zone, right, or if I'm at the very least forcing you to crash on the ball, if I'm forcing the play out and grind out defensive possessions. Bottom line, if I could just not, allow you to finish your possession in a press, I'm winning. It allows me, if you're in some kind of zone when the possession ends and we don't do something silly and turn it over recklessly, there's no erratic decision making on our end, right? And we turn the ball over at control, we're now coming back on defense feeling really good and in control. And then that allows us to be in a little more of a position to dictate terms in our backcourt. And we're set up for way more success than we would otherwise be, where we're on our bellies, swimming in our transition, trying to catch up. We're not gaining information. We're able to talk. And so there's the Jacob Reese stonecutter quote. Have you ever heard that before? It's about just constantly the stonecutter hits away at the stone and hits away at the stone. It doesn't break the 998th, 999, but on the 1000th one it hit, right? And so that's kind of the idea of a positive possession. It's just, play good water polo for what you're trying to accomplish, right? Stick to your plan, no erratic decision making, no sloppy turnovers, forcing them into a zone, those kind of things, and eventually those things will pay off in way of goals. Information, I mentioned this earlier, man, it's so important. Like, obviously teaching your athletes to gain information, but then teaching them how to process it and synthesize it and figure out what's important, what's not, and then communicate that and echo that to each other. It's huge. It's huge. It does us no good to the smartest athlete in the world, but then they're not helping their teammate to their left or right when they're in trouble somehow. There's someone swimming behind them or whatever. There's a lack of awareness. So obviously, ball player center awareness is important, but like I said, time, clock, or situation, personnel, matchups, score, all these things matter. Okay, so gain the information, process the information, and then communicate the information. Spacing. Great spacing. Good teams have great spacing. That doesn't mean they don't isolate players, and that's obviously our job as coaches to put players in position to be successful, right? But we don't run like an ISO player. We don't do something to isolate a player, and by definition, right, if you're isoing on one side, you're going to be overloaded on the other side, right? And so they have a plan how to balance themselves out if they are going to run an isolation play, or at the very least, we'll talk about this idea of having two attacks in a minute, but at the very least, having space in your front court forces defenders to make choices. If they're allowed, if two players are really close to each other, they don't have to worry about someone sliding. I can shot block here and I can hold this guy, or whatever the case may be. But the more space there is in the pool and in a triangle, the more defenders then have to choose. Am I going to help back here at center? Am I going to guard here? And then it makes your decision making, or your players' decision making on offense way easier. It's cleaner. They don't have to. It's not as confusing, right? And of course, the last point I just make about spacing is it's always easier to attack space than it is to create it and then attack it. And so think about in the counterattack. If you finish, you enter your front court with great spacing, your ability to flow into whatever front court offense you have is astronomically, you're going to be way more successful and more efficient doing that than finishing with poor spacing and then trying to negotiate yourself out of that. So last point, having two attacks. This is crucial, and I don't know how I kind of, this is not my idea. This was shown to me over a period, years, and I kind of put together some stuff. But it's this idea that you have an on-ball attack and an off-ball attack. And it's not like an offensive system per se or anything. It's just, if you watch any good water polo, right, or any good sports, think about basketball. The ball's on the right side of the court, right? They got a post-up guy in there. On the left side, they're running cuts. They're doing something on the other side, and the ball is constantly swinging from one side of the court to the other. And when you watch good water polo, it's similar. Maybe having it as fast, right? Because it's not basketball in smaller space, whatever. But the ball's moving from one side, or at least the threat of the ball to move from one side or the other. It makes you, multi-dimensional, not just one thing. So that's kind of talk a little bit about that. So for example, right, coming off the counterattack, You're coming off the counterattack, you have a player here, you're your early release, position 3, 2, 1, and your center. And the center defender has position, so the ball's down here at 5. Well, a ball side attack would be maybe a drive from 3. Whether they get actually ball side and it's a scoring threat or not is really irrelevant at this point, right? It's the fact that by him moving to the ball side and driving to the ball side, right? These defenders over here have to account for that to a certain degree, but then it also frees up a lot more space over on the left side for the left side to work. So what do you want to do? Well, you can run a little 1-2 pick. You can just straight go a triangle drive from 2. And if you get open, you score, because this guy has good spacing. If you don't, maybe X1 pulled off to help that cross pass. And then 1 now has freedom to get on his legs and play. And it facilitates that ball swing. Okay? Maybe he does get open, and these players come back into the zone, and still you have now a viable attack on the ball, and then a viable attack on the off ball. Maybe that turns into a post-up. Maybe you can get a live release. Once the ball comes over to this side, it can be a live release in the 2 meters. So it's an idea that just always valuing both sides of the pool working, the ball side and the non-ball side. And you can have 2 post-ups going on in the box. You can have a drive and a post-up. Don't really want 2 drives going on. You always want a presence inside the box established, posting up, whether they're actually getting position or not on the ball. So those are the 5 areas, and I have notes that go along with them that you can kind of, you'll have access to, and obviously we'll be here through the weekend and tonight. But those were just some things that I found valuable. There's so much more that could go into, right? You're talking about offense but those are 5 things that I found valuable. I mean, the bottom line is you want to be like water. You want to be able to teach your athletes to flow. The same friend that talked about the airplane thing always refers to things in black and white, A and B. You know, we're going to have an attack, and we're going to have 2 options off that. And you're going to stop us with A, but we're going to kill you on B. Or you're going to stop with B, we're going to get you on A, but you can't do both. And how you do that, right, is with spacing and with 2 attacks and things like that. But you're adaptable. You flow like water. You don't get stopped doing one thing, and that's why having that idea of, oh, we always drive from ball side from 2, or we 32 pet, or things like that, that's fine. That's really good. But what happens after that, right? You know, here's the goal, right? We have a presence in the box. We set a little ball side drive. Well, if 3 helps off, right? If X3 helps off, 1 better realize that, and you better not wrap up and try to do something. You better stay low, because 3 is going to want to kick into this open water a little bit, right? And catch the ball for a shot, maybe. So just having that plan of freedom in a box, right? Freedom to make reads, but also having an understanding, a plan of what you want to accomplish. So that was offense. You know, yeah. What?
Yeah, I think we should take a moment to pause.
Yeah.
I think
it's an awkward transition going from offense to defense.
Yeah. But how about to make it less awkward? We'll take 2 minutes if you guys got questions.
Yeah.
Let's get a card out, right? Because that's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that we put in a short amount of time. But if you want to talk about like specific things about offense, put it on a card right now, and then we'll put it in the bucket. We can talk about it right when we come back up again.
You know? If you want to shout out a question, I can take a couple questions, or you can write them down on your card.
Another good way to think about this thing too, I was thinking about with positive possessions, right? So we talk about positive. Another coach taught this to me, it was regurgitated to you. But the way to think about positive possessions is think about baseball. It's relatively a baseball town here, right? And so that was somewhat of a joke, but go Cubs, right?
Go Reds.
And if you think about baseball, right? If you're a Hall of Fame, if you're Tony Gwynn or something, right? And you're a Hall of Fame baseball player, what's your batting average? Your career lifetime batting average is like 333, right? That means 7 out of 10 at-bats, Tony Gwynn failed, right? If you're looking at it from the wrong lens, right? But he's a Hall of Fame baseball player. So what I think Coach Clute's trying to say with those positive possessions, right, is that means in those could he have a good at-bat? How many of those other at-bats where he didn't get a hit were good at-bats? Right? Did he make the pitcher go deep in the pitch count? Right? Did he make get on base? All those things? You can have a lot of positive possessions that don't translate to goals. And that's a good way to talk to teams about this, because athletes think, hey, we went down, we didn't score. Oh man, we failed. Right? a great baseball player, 10 at-bats, will only get 3 hits out of those 10 at-bats. So it's a good way to kind of pace out that thought. But anyway, keep the thoughts going as we transition here. But thank you.
All right. So, ready to go into defense. We're going fast. So this is how you want to feel, right, when we're on defense. You want to feel like, you look at this guy, he's in control, he's dictating. This guy right here is able to ride that bike where he's riding his bike because this guy is allowing him to do that. He's not, it might look chaotic, but he's organizing the chaos, and he's comfortable in the chaos. This is how you don't want to be, right? We don't want our athletes to feel this way in our defense, right? We don't want to be panicked. What little information is he able to gain, or how much information is very little. So how do we make sure we feel more like in control and dictating? Our athletes feel this way versus like this, and that it all starts with valuing the press and striving the press. And you know, a lot of really successful teams run zones. Zones are great, and zones have an appropriate spot. But I think so much comes out of a press that's even beyond just the tactical stuff. It's the mentality. It's the kind of that blue collar, hard working mentality that's just, we're going to press you. And there's a lot of effort and energy that goes into that. And what that does emotionally to your opponent too has real consequences. So valuing a press. So why press, right? We put them under duress. We speed up their internal clock, right? They're not able to process information as quickly. We get to dictate terms a little bit to them. We get to slow down ball movement. We get to disrupt their rhythm. Okay, think about the balls being pressed, right? Whatever position, and the position next to them releases for the ball. Even if they got a good release on my teammate, if I'm applying really good ball pressure, that window closes really quickly, and he separates to make a pass, and then my teammate had time to recover, and then he has to go back to protecting the ball. And so just constantly disrupting their rhythm is valuable. It gets them, it allows you to play ahead of them, and of course, it sets up your counterattack. Even if you're able to have to go into a zone at some point in your possession, if you can get yourself out of the zone, it sets up your counterattack. Team defense, press defense is the ultimate, you can be viewed as the ultimate team defense. All 7 players, including the goalie, have to play at a high level. They have to be doing things on ball, off ball, center defender, goalie. All things have to be working together in concert. You can't have one person kind of lazily pressing off ball, because eventually that press will break down pretty quickly. So it can be viewed as like the ultimate team defense. So it starts in your front court, right? Or starts in your counterattack, right? So you want to control, you want to anticipate, and you want to cover. Okay, so at the end of your possession, right, you want to be well balanced. You want to limit your kind of erratic decision making. Like an example would be someone's going to shoot the ball when someone's driving on the opposite side of the pool, right, or the opposite side. So someone's shooting from 4 while someone's driving from 2 or something like that. Setting some random goofy pick that's not really, it's really sloppy. It's not really what you do. It catches people off by surprise, and it's an offensive foul, right? Those are things that you want to limit. In this area of the pool. Information, again, you want to be able to gather information. You want to get on your back as soon as possible. You want to start talking and echoing information. And just the bottom line, get organized. Get organized. And this doesn't mean like they have to figure it out. This goes back to having a plan too. A lot of the stuff on offense kind of comes over to the defensive side as well. But you want to have a plan. How are you going to handle the 2-on-1? How are you, are you really active? Like, what's your plan? And that has to be kind of hashed out in your practices. And of course, organize, right? And then dictate, right? It starts in the middle of the pool, but figure out how are you going to prevent layups and dunks? That's what it comes down to. How are you going to protect the box in the middle of the pool? How are you going to mitigate some of the bad things that are coming your way, assuming you're not in the transition counterattack and you're not pressing right away? And so, another friend of mine has this phrase, steal time, attack their mind. You just want to delay a little bit. You just want to put doubt in their minds a little bit. You want someone who's dribbling with the ball to stop dribbling with the ball, pick it up, and then start dribbling it again. And just those little things, assuming all the other teammates, maybe the one that's down is chasing and swimming hard, that adds up a lot and matters. So those little things focus a lot in your transition defense. And then it's a little cut off here, but once you're in your front court or your back court, right? Flowing wise, okay, you want to be, hopefully you're starting in a press, and we'll go over all the kind of some details with the press. You want to, if you have to go into a zone, you go into a zone. Maybe you don't go into a zone and you're staying in a press, but at the end of it, you want to be able to counterattack out of the press. Okay, you can still counterattack out of a zone, absolutely. There's some kind of cool, fun ways to counterattack out of a zone, but all things considered, counterattacking out of the press is way more efficient, and it sets up your front court offense that we talked about earlier way better. So, goals of the press. You know, you want to limit exclusions, and I think we all can agree. You know, no backcourt exclusions, no transition exclusions, no exclusions off drives. You know, I know we talk about, you know, taking exclusions, this idea of taking exclusions, and, you know, depending on level, and maybe you have a really good 5-man, I don't know, but I don't like that. I just don't like taking exclusions. I know data sometimes says it's okay to do or whatever. I think in high school especially, and that's kind of the lens in which I'm looking at this through, I think that you're more successful when you develop your players to just be really good on-ball defenders, even in the box, and then have athletes that are crashing back to steal the ball. So that center or that post-up player gets a second or so to score the ball with immense pressure, with disciplined pressure. The person's grinding on their legs, you're not bailing them out, right? And from my experience, you know, you're going to be way more successful. They're going to get off a weaker shot. Goalie's going to block it. It's going to be stolen, whatever. Versus just simply taking the exclusion. Because then there's other stuff too that comes along with that. You take the exclusion, they're high school kids. It's, you know, the team that goes on the power play now has a lot of confidence, right? Now they get to work in a zone, basically a zone attack, 6-on-5, and, you know, maybe they don't get a shot off, but now your team's had to grind out a 5-man possession. And so I just think, like, energy-wise, if the ball comes in, to their center, you're playing good defense, they come back, crash, steal the ball, fans go nuts, yeah, they're jacked, they counter out hard. From my experience, it's a little more valuable. So limit high percentage shots, talked about no layups, no buckets. So know your high percentages, that goes taking away your counterattack advantages. Don't give up 1-on-nos, 2-on-1s, etc. That takes place in how you're taking care of the ball. It matters how you're taking care of the ball in the front court, right? Are you having that sloppy decision making? Are you turning the ball over on the perimeter? Things like that. If you can solve those problems in your front court, it takes away their ability to create those easy 2-on-1s, 1-on-nos, and blast you in the counterattack. Then you can enter your front court defense a little more in control, able to dictate to them. Does that make sense? That kind of flow, that how everything kind of connects. You know, limiting possessions. I mentioned this earlier. Like, the simple fact if you just go in the counterattack, and I see this a lot of times in the high school guys that I coach and girls that I've coached, is, you know, if they're not up, if they don't have like a clear advantage, they kind of downshift into that 80%, and they just get into their front court and they go play offense. And if go back and watch film, I mean, you'll see how many times by them doing that it allows their defender to get on their back and start getting organized. And so they may not be up, they may not be the best player in the pool, but if they can go and force that defender to be on their stomach, that disjoints them to that much more degree, right? And it allows your team, to be a little more in a position to dictate and gain more information, and limits their ability to do the same. And then keep the ball in the box. It's our version of pack the paint, right, in basketball. The more you keep the ball further away from your goal, the better. That's why, you know, if you can't press all the time, you got to go in a zone, you got to go in a zone. But the idea is don't let the ball get in the box. 4 shots further away from the goal. 4 shots outside the post further away from the goal. So when talking about a press, 3 components: on-ball, off-ball, and center defender. So on-ball pressure, you know, really what we want to do is turn their chest and their face away from the box. And again, it's all about limiting their ability to access information. So if I'm able to overplay their strong side, either with a cross reach or just with taking little strokes like this, but get them to turn their body away from their center or the box or a drive, it disrupts their rhythm, it disrupts timing of a drive, opening and closing of windows, and then of course it delays fouls. And you know, if you're delaying a foul, if 2 players play good on-ball defense and delay a foul 2 seconds, combined that's 4 seconds you've stolen from them in their front court. So if you can kind of think along those lines, you can see how very quickly, and already a possession, that's not a lot of time, 17 seconds or something like that, once you get down there from the counter. That stuff adds up, builds up. Off-ball defense. We heard of the 1, 2, 3 away and how you position yourself off ball before. Just this idea that if here's X or here's position 1 and I'm X1 and the ball's all the way at 4, I can be off him a little bit and be okay. If the ball's at position 2, I need to be tighter on this person, right? Does that make sense? So kind of a general rule that we've used is just strokes. However many people the ball is away from you is just how many strokes or lunges that you need to be away. And so that's involved, the athlete figuring out what that is. I mean, we have some athletes that are pretty athletic and they can be a couple feet further away because their legs are loaded and they do a good job of keeping their body coiled. And when the ball moves, they're able to kick into whatever position they need to be in. Some athletes aren't as athletic, and so they need to have that awareness and position themselves accordingly. How high, how low, right? The ball's high, like in the counterattack, the ball's the goalie or the ball's a short release. You can be a little higher. Maybe use that 2-meter line as a second defender or whatever, but you can be a little higher. So if the goal's over here and the ball's over there, I can be a little higher in the lane here. Okay, once the ball goes low from position 4 to 5, maybe I now need to kind of adjust a little bit and get my body a little lower. You can kind of visualize that. So defending drives from the top line, this is all part of like what makes up a press and the ingredients of a press, right? We want to force presses or drives to go behind us. We don't want to let drives go across the mouth of the goal. We don't want to allow drives to go for ball side and just give them ball side. So that starts with how we position ourselves off the ball, right? Knowing that part of sending people behind you is knowing that you have help behind you. So imagine if you're at position 2, if I'm at X2 and you drive and I force you to go behind me, right? I have X1 over there who is able to come off his player a little bit and help with that cross pass. And if it's not needed, then he plays the lane on when the position 1 goes on an up drive or whatever. But I have help behind me. And everything working together, that ball is presumably under great pressure, and that person with the ball is under some kind of duress, and those windows aren't as open or as easily accessible for the player with the ball. Helping on X1 and X5, or helping from X1 and X5 on drives, we've talked about that a little bit. Becoming the on-ball defender is really important in a press too. I think, your body's coiled, the ball's coming. I think it's really valuable to challenge all passes, right? So try to tip the ball and deflect it, try to steal it outright. But then training our athletes to quickly recoil our body and our legs, get our legs grinding, and hang. And we'll do laps of this where we swim 4 or 5 strokes, get to our legs, jump up, and just hang. We call them Air Jordans, where they just slowly lower down like this. So we're just building that leg strength and that ability to maintain this position. Because again, if I can delay that foul from being called, think about what a player usually does, right? When they receive the ball on a release, if they're under pressure, what's the first thing they want to do? They want to draw a foul? Yeah, they kind of want an easy, they don't want a pressure pass. There's under great pressure, they feel that pressure, they want a quick foul from the referee. So if we can train our athletes to overplay the strong side, not touch their neck or their shoulders, right? It just looks bad from the referee standpoint. And we can hang on our legs, right, and keep our hands dry. Even if we can delay that foul for 2 or 3 seconds, that matters. Because again, like I said, if my teammate can do the same thing, that's 5, 6 seconds we've stolen from them just because we're disciplined and more willing to stay in a press and to do the little things in a press to be successful. And then, just some general rules with on-ball pressures, period, in a press defense. No live entries, so that doesn't mean just foul them right away, right? That means don't let them catch the ball and open their chest up to the box. If they're going to receive the ball, they have to, if it's dry, they're immediately turning into this protected position, or they're doing it with the ball being passed wet and them kind of moving and leaning away from the center. Okay, so they're off their legs a little bit, and they're already in a position of weakness, and then you can kind of run them away from the box and be disciplined. Center defender, same idea as the perimeter. You want a little more space. Centers want to lock up and have a lot of contact. Defenders want to be able to move and be free. I I think one of the most important parts is on this is just having a plan. Like center defenders, it's really important at the high school level. You know, as smart as a high school player is, they're not that smart. And you know, one thing that we've implemented, we got in a lot of trouble this year when the ball would swing from like the right side to the left side. And you know, let's say X3 would look back and have this moment of freeze. Well, his name's Sean, was our defender. Is Sean gonna get position? Is he gonna maintain his position or not? Or you know, and Sean sometimes wouldn't be able to fight around. And there was just this moment of like indecision where the ball put a lot of pressure on our on-ball defender. And if he didn't do a bang-up job, then that ball got into a live entry. So we just put in a rule. If the ball swung and goes over your head as a defender, so imagine like ball's at 4, or ball's over here at 4, I'm at X3, ball goes from 4 to 3, goes over my head, I'm immediately just turning around and jumping head and feet out into a zone. And Sean, our defender, knows if it skips left side to right side, he's getting behind and he's pushing. And so it just kind of eliminated some lack or confusion in decision making. It allowed us to be a little more efficient. And then we had a plan on how to negotiate ourselves out of there. Were we coming back into 3-4? Were we going to like drop 3 and split over from 4? You know, you have a plan tactically, but at least it allowed us coaches to have a plan and our guys to feel really confident about running that plan. And then of course what doesn't get said right is that the ball's under immense pressure. That guy's not fouling and dropping back. There's already a zone there. He's doing his on-ball press kind of you know, checklist of hanging and not fouling. So once you press, you go into a zone. What kind of zone? Up to you, right? And we're not going to get into zone principles and stuff, but look, there's a ton of zones. One-player zone, multiplayer zones, trapping defenses, and you can get creative in how you do that. Go into a one-man zone into a two-man zone, or one man into a drop split, things like that. There's a ton of rules that go along with those things, and how you cover drives and how you pick up things and shot block lines and these and that. But the point is, whatever you do, have the intention of getting back to a press, right? Train and have your guys practice just trying to look for opportunities or create opportunities to get themselves back into a press to start your counter, right? And then it goes into your counterattack, right? You're anticipating, you're reacting, you're creating, etc., and blasting out on a counter. I said you can counterattack from a zone. That's fun and cool and creative. But all things considered, you want to get up and put pressure on that front line and get those 3 guys down there and establish a deep line and so on and so forth. So if you take one thing from the defensive talk, it's just like, you know, be prepared. Have a plan for how you're going to be attacked, and not like stick to the plan stupidly. Be flexible, make adjustments, but have a plan, big picture, and then work backwards. What are the skills that I need to do to develop these? You know, if I want to run a press, well, there's a number of skills, and Coach Layson will talk about this a little bit in a bit. But there's things then you have to do in practice. You got to train your players to play the way they want to play. You know, you got to train the way you want them to perform. And so ideally, then you're looking like this guy, right? Ideally, then you're looking like he's in control. Right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but this guy is the baddest dude ever. If your defense can look like this, you're in business. Everyone moves on his count. No one moves if he doesn't want anyone to move. So, yeah, it's a mindset too, right? I mean, obviously there's skill involved in moonwalking, but if he doesn't believe he's the baddest, you don't want him moonwalking, then it doesn't really work. So with that, that'll kind of take us out of our time, about 52 minutes, so I cut off a few. If you have any questions, you want to talk about right now about offense and defense, I'd love to do that. If not, you can write them on your index card and we can answer them in the Q&A. But thank you very much for letting me speak to you.
We're going to make it a shorter break because the food was last time, so 10 minutes. So 5:45, we'll start again at 5:45, but 10 minutes, questions, food.